AI is going to change and transform almost everything that we know for humanity. And some of it's going to create challenges that we can't even foresee.
Hi, I'm Jayson Manship, host of Authentic and Agentic, presented by TechPoint. Every week on this show, we break down what's happening in AI and what it means for how we work, lead, and live. Join me for a human-focused conversation that keeps you ahead of the curve. This is the Authentic and Agentic podcast on the IBJ Media Podcast Network.
Hey guys, Jayson Manship here, your host at Authentic and Agentic. This is the podcast where we talk about AI, but with a human lens. And today I'm traveling. If you're watching the video, you see the hotel room behind me. I am in Memphis, Tennessee. I am keynote speaking at this conference. It's a restoration conference for companies that come in after a flood or a fire. And they asked me to come talk about AI. And I think that's interesting because this is not a company that's like sit behind a computer and type into a keyboard kind of company. These are companies that an entire industry that is boots on the ground, getting their hands dirty. And they're saying, hey, AI is important to how we're thinking about business. And so here to talk to a bunch of CEOs and leaders of those companies and help them think through how AI fits into their business. And I think that's what I'm seeing the more I talk to folks is that it is becoming a part of how do I run my company. And so just excited to have those conversations with this team here today, folks. But every week we do this show. Every week we have awesome guests on. I typically do a news segment. Today I'm not going to because I literally am traveling and I haven't had time, frankly. I mean, what a world, right? What a world we live in. So apologies to you for that if you tune in this week or every week for this segment. I will have it next week during my interview with Adam Brown. But this week I'm talking to three of the leaders from Indiana's tech policy group, ITIA. And we chat with them about what's going on in the state of Indiana and in some ways more broadly. But it's really about how are legislators thinking about AI? What does that process look like? How does the sausage get made behind the scenes? And we got a good group of folks today. I've got John Wechsler, who's a close friend of mine, who's been on the podcast before. John's the CEO of Spokenote. Spokenote is incredible company out of Fishers, Indiana. I actually worked there for a good bit of time, helping John scale that company. But John's a serial entrepreneur, history of successes. If you've been in Fishers, you've been to Launch Fishers. He did the Fishers Test Kitchen. He did the Internet of Things Lab. He's got a handful of startups that have had a major impact here in the local community, and he's just one of the smartest guys I know. We talked to Zach Carstensen here. Zach is a regional leader at Salesforce. Maybe you've heard of them. They've got a big tower in downtown Indianapolis. They are a huge tech company based in Silicon Valley, San Francisco specifically, and then their second biggest, I guess, group of humans that all work together under the Salesforce umbrella is here in Indianapolis. They acquired a company a few years back called ExactTarget, which was a huge boon to the local tech ecosystem, startup system. ExactTarget built something pretty magical with their email marketing tool for like commercial grade stuff. Salesforce brought that in-house, and Salesforce has really taken over the enterprise level. It was CRM. Now it's really like business operations. I mean, they have AI baked into all their stuff, and it is really neat to see that company, that product, those people continue to flourish in this space. So Zach brings a pretty cool perspective because he joins us actually from Chicago area, but he is the Indiana rep and follows policies and changes through how that works here in the state of Indiana. And then last is Jen Hallowell. Jennifer Hallowell has become a friend. I didn't know her well going into all of this, but man, she has been fighting on the forefront of tech innovation at the policy level for a long time. So she founded this organization. She's been around it a long time. And she is the one who is out there kind of boots on the ground, helping make Indiana's legislators and executive branch really think about technology and all of their considerations in terms of tax credits, in terms of funding, in terms of talent attraction. I mean, that organization led by Jen is really a driving force for good in terms of the longitudinal success of the state of Indiana. So they're not just pushing for a specific thing. This isn't like a a group that we're talking to today that is trying to hit some specific agenda item, and it's like, wow, if we get this, we win. This is the long term. These people are looking at this and saying, we really need to make a difference in the state of Indiana. Technology can help drive that, and so let's have that conversation. And so, really excited for my conversation with these three people today. Before we get to that, we're going to take a quick break from a couple of our sponsors. First up is TechPoint. They are the presenting sponsor of this show, and they have just been awesome to work with, as I've said many, many times. Well, in the next couple of weeks, I'm actually partnering with them for the Mira Awards. I will be at the Mira Awards interviewing winners as they come off stage. And so I'm really excited for that because I get a chance to talk to the people that are getting selected in real time. Hey, congratulations. You just won a Mira Award for Best X, Best Startup, Best Tech, whatever their categories are. They're going to come off stage. I'm going to interview them, and we're going to get a chance to talk to them. And so you're going to hear more about all those winners and what's happening in the state of Indiana with all the technology that's happening, which will be a lot of fun. The other sponsor that I'm really grateful for, they're relatively new, just a few episodes in at this point, is Indiana Wesleyan. And so IWU, as they go by, is really taking a lead in Indiana's AI space. And so these are folks that are saying, hey, AI matters at the collegiate level, and we're going to teach it, and we're going to help level people up, and we're going to make it a part of everything that we do here. And so grateful to TechPoint and to IWU, Indiana Wesleyan. So we'll roll a couple of ads for those folks, and then we will get on to the interview with Jen, Zach, and John.
AI isn't just changing jobs, it's changing who gets hired. TechPoint's new brief, AI Amplifies the Need to Address the Experience Gap, shows how AI is changing entry-level jobs, and how employers can take advantage of this moment. Download the brief and find out ways to get involved at techpoint.org/AI gap. AI is transforming every industry, and Indiana Wesleyan University is preparing professionals to lead that change. IWU offers a Master of Science in AI and Data Analytics, a graduate certificate in AI Business Innovation, and an Applied AI Analytics concentration, all designed for working adults. Flexible, online, Christ-centered, and grounded in biblical ethics. Discover how IWU can help you find the way forward. Visit indwes.edu. Hi, team. Welcome to the Authentic and Agentic podcast. I have three folks today that are board members of ITIA, one of which is the executive director herself. I don't think I can call you Madam President, but you're definitely the leader of the org, Ms. Hallowell. So can you tell us a little bit about what ITIA is and what it does?
Absolutely. So Indiana Technology and Innovation Association, we launched about 7 years ago and represent roughly 100 tech and innovation-driven companies across the state. And really our purpose is to bring tech and innovation-driven companies together, collaborate on policy, and identify areas that state government can either help advance technology and innovation type industries forward, or where there are issues, regulations that are overly burdensome, and advocate for those policies so that we can make Indiana even a better place for tech and innovation to thrive.
Love that. With you on the call today, I have Zach from Salesforce and John from Spokenote. Both have some pretty cool backgrounds that I'll let them expand on as we get into this interview. That I think will add a lot of flavor to this conversation. And so what I'd like to do, and maybe this is for Jen, you to start. Zach, I'd like your opinion on this too, because you work outside of just Indiana. You work in other groups also. But with AI's, it's taking over everything. It feels like it's just a part of everything we talk about now, right? Every TV commercial, every billboard, every conversation I have has the term AI in it. We look at this last legislative session here in Indiana. What came out of that? What actually changed? What's still in motion? Kind of give our listeners a rundown of what's going on in the world of tech and AI as it relates to the state legislature here in Indiana.
Sure. I would say, first of all, this last legislative session was a short session. And so there weren't as many major policies regarding AI that were advanced through that short session. It's definitely a topic of conversation, and I expect that we'll continue to see more, but there weren't any major initiatives that came out of this session. And frankly, in part, Indiana launched a AI task force a couple of years ago. And I think what a lot of the state leaders and legislators who are specifically focused on AI more than others are really looking and waiting to see if the federal government will act and enact some federal standards that would, frankly, that would help, I think, all companies who are interested in this so that you don't have a patchwork of 50 different state laws. But that being said, they are very intent on making sure that there are protections for, children and consumer protections. So that's an ongoing discussion, but I think the ideal scenario from state leader standpoint, and frankly, I think a lot of business standpoint, is that there would be a federal set of guidelines instead of something that you would have to, state by state comply with.
Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in that, and we'll get to that in a second. Zach, before we do though, you see other states and their policies and processes. How is this approach from Indiana different than maybe some of the other states you see?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. From my vantage point, Indiana is taking a careful, deliberative approach, which I think will ultimately serve the state well. There is this question of, will the federal government provide, some sort of overarching regulatory regime? I think everybody would like that. But the undercurrent of that is, where does it make sense also for states to go beyond what a federal regime might put in place? Is it proper for a state to be regulating frontier models, or is it better for the state of Indiana or any state to look more specifically at the things that are within their purview, education, for instance?
Yeah.
And I think that the deliberative approach that Indiana is taking is going to buy them time for the conversation to settle out, for them to understand the technology, both the good and the bad with the technology, and then proceed forward with whatever they do on the policy side from a very informed, thoughtful place. And they did that on privacy, of course. Like, Indiana wasn't the first state to jump at privacy regulation. They saw what other states had done, iterated on that, and in my opinion, produced a very good, comprehensive privacy law that considers business just as it considers consumer concerns.
Well, let me take a step backwards there. So for the listeners that maybe don't know, why, I mean, can anybody on the call, John, maybe even you can weigh in on this one, but help them understand the difficulty of having, 50 different states, different rules, and trying to, you run a tech startup that serves the entire country, right? How hard would it be if everything was whack-a-mole at a state level or county level, or how far this goes?
Yeah, I think, to understate it, I would call that a disaster. Think about it. We're sitting here in Fishers, Indiana, and all of a sudden we need to know 50 states and 49 other states and how they handle, regulation around a web product, something that we're going to serve up and could be available anywhere. It also is a global challenge as well when you're doing business, whether it's in Europe. We intentionally right now do not go to Europe because we do not understand well enough GDPR style, the European style of managing privacy, right? In America, it's very different. We know those rules and regs, and it's also not managed state by state. There are some unique nuances you need to know and pay attention to. It's a little bit like sales tax, Jayson, which, you have plenty of experience on the retail front, filing tax returns with 20 or so states and managing what you're collecting. And it's the same thing. It's just on a much bigger scale when you deal with a digital phenomenon like artificial intelligence. And, I absolutely echo Jen and Zach's comments that it feels like a federal thing with maybe some add-ins for infrastructure related to AI, or data centers are a hot button topic right now. How are we going to manage all of that supporting infrastructure? But the actual stakeholder and consumer facing AI regulatory environment, that should not be a state by state thing, in my opinion.
Okay. And just to double click on what you said there, John, I have a board game store we sell online, e-commerce, and I currently have to file and pay in 16 different states. And every state has different rules on and I'm a tiny little board game shop, right? I mean, it is a pain in the butt. It is unreasonably difficult. And thankfully, there are spin-up companies that I can pay thousands of dollars to take that effort off of my plate, but it's not easy. And so I can only imagine in this world of bits and bytes and AI that's an impossible task.
And that just to accentuate the point here, that is unneeded regulation and burden on small businesses. When you think about, you have to actually take money out of your margin to pay someone else just so you can comply with a state by state regulatory environment. And so I just, I just want to make sure that it's crystal clear that we're all better off without that kind of regulatory burden when you're trying to start a business. It makes it a lot harder than it needs to be.
So let's talk a little bit about this federal direction then. I was at a conference in DC last week. Axios put one on. It was an AI conference put on by Axios. And I can't remember if it was Jim Vanderhei or Mike Allen. One of the leaders of the organization was interviewing a spokesperson from the White House. Apparently, the White House has rolled out their own national AI policy platform plan, right? I don't know this world very well. I don't know if that's puffery or if that's practical. I don't know if it's directional for Congress to take and run with. Like, can some of you who are smarter than me maybe weigh in and help us understand, like, is this just like a directional thing that we're saying at the top, or is this got some meat on the bone, or like what are we looking at here on the national side?
I'm interested to hear what Zach has to say, but I'll just weigh in from my perspective. And for folks who are listening and care about it, it's actually a very interesting document that the White House put out, this framework that covers AI really in lots of different perspectives, and whether it's data centers, regulation. And so I would call it, while it's pretty simple and easy to read and consume, but it's robust in terms of the areas that it covers, and it's the administration providing their guidance to Congress about how they should act, like what they would view as the ideal legislative package to come out. And anyway, I think it's very thoughtful, and it seems to me to be an effective approach. That we've really spent a lot of time to dial in where we think guardrails need to be. And so if Congress were to build out policy acting on this, I think it would be pretty effective. And I'm sure there may be things that certain folks don't like about parts of it, but overall, I thought it was a really beneficial, thoughtful document. Zach, I don't know if you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, federal policy isn't necessarily my wheelhouse, but I think we were pleasantly surprised at the nuance, like within this like second statement from the administration. If you remember, the first attempt at sort of setting the narrative on this really emphasized the state preemption piece. This document that Jennifer was referencing touches on a lot of the things that Salesforce cares about. Risk-based regulation, AI adoption, like skills training. There's the infrastructure piece as well. It's a much more varied and comprehensive, but also like it's really thoughtful. Like that, they're drilling into it. I hope it's not just it's not just like a messaging document. I hope there's there's a real attempt around whether it's the administration or folks in Congress to try to codify some of this and lead in this moment that very much like like we need
Yeah.
federal leadership on the issue.
That's great. And that's good to hear that perspective as well. Jen, you shared that it was a short session, so there's a lot of moving parts behind the scenes, and there's some national exposure happening and some conversations happening at a national level. If you were saying, this is what Indiana needs to get right when it comes to AI, because even that description of the federal policy talked about 15 different buckets or things to care about, right? We're not going to get them all right on our first swing. What does the organization, ITIA, what do you guys as leaders in the organization, like, how are you thinking about the AI side of this? Like, is it consumer protection? Is it innovation? Is it infrastructure? Is it, government use of AI? Is it jobs? Like, there are so many hard problems to solve here. How do you dig in and dive into these hard topics?
I think first, if we could, and this is a big if, as we know, getting things through Congress is challenging, but if we would assume that Congress does act and do something along the lines that provides some of these basic protections that we've talked about, then I think the opportunity and really need for Indiana is three things. One, I think that state leaders, and this is really what the AI task force has been focused on more so far, is how can state government leverage AI to make state government smarter, more effective, more efficient, so that we can, deliver services to Hoosiers better and at a lower cost and save taxpayer dollars. So that's one, and I think that's where a lot of their focus is. The other two are in kind of K through 12, and the Department of Education Secretary Katie Jenner has already been really engaged in this, and they've put forward guidelines for school districts as to provide some guidance on how to use AI as a tool for teachers, how to, get kids to understand how to use it effectively, safely, in the right way, and when to cite it, and all those sorts of things. So they've really been kind of leading on that effort, which I think is fantastic, and we need to continue to do. And then the third piece is workforce development. We have to figure out how to make sure that Hoosiers understand and can leverage and use AI in the workforce, so that we are training or retraining people so that the Hoosier economy can be improved through the use of AI.
Yeah, and I would double click on that a little bit with the focus on the education, K through 12 and higher ed, use of AI and training of AI, just literacy. The answer is certainly not to stick your head in the sand and just hope that it doesn't impact us. It is more transformative and more of a change than the introduction of the internet into our lives. AI is going to change and transform almost everything that we know for humanity, and some of it's going to create challenges that we can't even foresee. And I think the more literate we can be and more aware of the AI landscape, the better we are positioned to build a workforce that is work ready, but then also creating entrepreneurial opportunities for those that want to create the next generation of companies leveraging AI for good.
Well, I want to dig into that a little bit. So AI does increase the speed at which we can get work done. It helps us be more autonomous. There's so much value that comes out of it. But with great power comes great responsibility, as Peter Parker's Uncle Ben told us. And so as we think about that, right, there's a line between supporting humans and replacing humans. And not just in capacity, but also in judgment, right? Like letting the AI bots take over versus having a human in the loop, et cetera. This is a pretty broad question, John. I'd like for you to start on it, but how are we thinking about that kind of stuff? Like, it just feels like this is the problem of my generation. Oof. How are we thinking about I had a chat this morning with someone that said, hey, this tool that I'm using now could probably replace 4 people's jobs. That's a scary factor, right?
It's a reality, and I think you're right on the the idea. We think of AI as an alternate an acronym for authentic interaction. And we place an ultra high premium on that authenticity. And actually, the reality is, we at Spokenote are solving a problem that AI is creating, and that is this huge chasm between authenticity and scale. You can tell instantly the people that interplead their world to AI and just say, let's make it all automated. Because if you've been in this long enough, you can see AI content, you can see generative AI. Right when you see it, you know it. And so we are absolutely believers that the technology should amplify our voices, not replace them. And so the best we can do as a private company here in Indiana is to live that life, lead, speak up when we feel like we need to, but then also be involved with organizations like ITIA and get in and get involved and understand the impact of this and try to affect policy where we can. And so every single thing around me focuses on authenticity in the use of AI. So when you talk about nonprofits, for instance, using AI, there is this huge thing that's developing here where there's a lot of skepticism around the use of the ask, let's say, using AI for the ask, right? It's accepted in infrastructure, preparation for meetings, back office, reporting. Using machines to work smarter is the way it should go. But when you advance that too far into that last mile of stakeholder facing communication or things that don't appear authentic, that is where things start to break apart. And that's just my word of caution. I'm not chicken little about it. The sky is falling, but I am kind of a cautionary voice that says, we should be using this technology to scale our decision making and businesses, but we got to be careful about how far we take it into that last mile of stakeholder facing communications.
Yeah, let me. I'm going to dig into that for just a second because I had an interesting situation happen a couple weeks ago I have a board game store. We talked about that briefly already, and we did we used Nano Banana to create a Facebook post, just a little caricature type Facebook post. Created it in no time, put it up, and I got 50 negative comments and I think 4 or 5 1-star reviews on my business on Google because we are abusing artists and stealing from artists and not. And so I think what you just said there is really interesting because I'm on the side of the fence that it's not all good and it's not all bad, right? It's like there's nuance in every piece of this. And so my perspective on that whole thing was like, we actually hired an artist. The woman who posted it went to the Heron School of Art. She is an artist. She just wasn't going to spend 2 hours creating a Facebook post that 6 people saw, right? So she used a tool at her disposal to generate something quickly and put it up. And man, we had to deal with the backlash of that for weeks.
I mean, the backlash, Jason, is you got 5 times the number of viewers. There are apparently 36 that saw it.
That's right, for sure.
But, I mean, my personal take on that is it feels like way overreaction on behalf of people to you guys doing, what you do. And, that is also the world we live in of this just whipsaw reactions that are so extreme. But, I don't think
as I've unpacked it over the last couple of weeks, I think it's when we don't understand something, right? We don't understand the nuance. We tend to just go towards a thing. And so it is AI art is bad, period, full stop, boycott, boycott, boycott. The very next week I was in DC at this Axios conference and one of the heads from Adobe was there, right? One of the literal C-suite people at Adobe was there talking. I don't know if you guys have used Adobe recently, but it's like all AI all the time in their tool, right? There is so much AI baked into their product. And that is a product designed for the creator community, right? Quite literally, it is designed for those people that are hating on the fact that AI is here. And so I only tell that story because I think what you said, John, is really interesting. We can't lose our authenticity. That is what makes us human. But we also have to understand that, like, if you put your head in the sand and just don't do anything, you're going to get blown out. And so it is a nuance. It is a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And we have to kind of keep our, as I was talking through this with some of my staff here at the game store, they felt like art is different than code, right? Because they were all in on using vibe coding to create apps, but they were all out on art. And the rationale that was shared with me was art feels like you're pouring your soul into it. It feels like your personality, and code is just like a work product, if that makes sense. So, I mean, I think there's just so much nuance in this. And the reason this podcast exists is because I want to have those types of conversations. I think we need to hear from more people. I have Jeb Banner coming on in a couple weeks, and I know, John, you probably know Jeb, but he's an artistic tech guy, right? And he has the coolest stories, and he is like weighing this stuff out on LinkedIn. Like, hey, I'm an artist. And he said something the other day. It was like, I had AI sing a song that I wrote, and it performed it better than I ever could, and I didn't know what to think about that because it was both
Well,
amazing and awesome, and scary and terrible, and all of the above.
100%. And when you talk to Jeb, make sure to ask him about our experiment at South by Southwest. 16 years ago, we were together at South by Southwest and we did an experiment. And the experiment was I am going to take his phone, his iPhone, for 24 hours, and I'm going to keep it. He's going to go through a day of South by without his phone. And then we're going to record him turning his phone back on and watching it just come to life. And that was a real thing that we did. And it was probably one of the most tumultuous 24 hours of his life to go through a tech and entertainment conference like South by without having access to any of the technology that would integrate into that experience. Imagine that, but now replace iPhone with AI and say, we're going to go 24 hours or we're going to go a week without being able to use AI to think through a problem, organize thoughts, generate, summary. I mean, I use it daily and it's central to really what we do now. And we are more productive with it, but it is going to be an essential element for any knowledge worker in the go forward. And it will make us all better workers at the end of the day. Our coders, our developers are 2 to 3 to 5 times more productive, 5 times more productive, by the way. So you can either sit there and chisel it out the old school way, or you can drop it in, get the code. You spend a little bit on code quality and investing on, integrating and making sure that it's what you wanted. But the reality is it's here to stay.
Let's talk a little bit about trust, because I think authenticity to me is really driven by trust, right? That I can actually trust who you are, what you say, what you do. When I was in DC last week for the Axios thing, right as the president of Meta, Dina Powell McCormick, was coming on stage, 10 minutes before that, a landmark case came out of LA about social media's impact. I don't know if you guys saw this story, but in essence, the jury found them negligent or negligible or whatever the term is. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know what the exact terms are. But the premise was that, they helped cause anxiety, depression, mental health issues through their social media platforms. And as I've kind of unpacked that over the last week on the show, what I've been thinking about is I think that we're seeing this trust change, right, with consumers. We're saying, hey, can I trust that thing? And so I'd be curious to hear, how realistic is it for us to expect AI-driven decisions to be explainable in plain English? What does it look like to have accountability in AI? What does it look like when tools are making decisions, when AI is doing its thing, right? How do we understand that? How do we know that it's got our best interests, or it's nuanced, or it's listening, or, man, it just feels like a hard thing to unpack.
And the answers vary, by the way, depending on which model and the way they're being used. I mean, for instance, I was reading about Claude this week and some enhancements that you can put into your prompts that you can literally tell Claude to take a little more time on this. Think about this a little extra. It's kind of weird to think that a computing resource might hurry up and kind of make some things up, and just like we would if we were cutting corners and moving fast. Or you prompt the engine to say, take your time on this one. The answer quality matters more than the speed. It's really wild, but I do believe that it makes me a better manager at the end of the day to learn how to prompt and use AI, because now I find myself really methodically explaining what I need, what I expect, how I want to go about it. And it's funny because when you use that same methodology then with a human and you face them and you say, here's what I'd like, I expect this, do this, by the way, spend a little more time, you get better results all the way around. So The trust thing is very real. One other thing, you're nodding there, Jen. I'm curious to hear what's on your mind. But there is a book that we're really big fans of, and right now we're mentioning it everywhere we go. It's called Neuro Giving, and it's by Cherian Koshi. And the book focuses on the science, the neuroscience of the nonprofit world, and what makes people, want to give, what makes for trust in a relationship. And there's a whole lot about AI in there to unpack, and that is that we tend to not trust things that are perfect. When you watch something that is flawless, your first thought is like, it just seems like inauthentic that they didn't give an an, or they didn't scratch, they didn't take a drink of a soda. There's something about authentically being a human that makes us a little more trustworthy. And so it's the one thing that we really risk giving up if we interplead too much of this world to the messaging, with AI.
My Google Notebook LM podcast people, where you give them a thing and it generates a podcast in real time. If you haven't tried that, you should. But last week I caught my two fake AI hosts talking to each other, and one of them actually coughed. And I'm like, oh my God, what are we doing here? It was
Nice.
very weird. Very weird.
I remember about a year ago when the first time, just like that, first time Chat GPT empathized with me, and I had a really tough topic that I was trying to coach someone on, and I was dumping it in to get some things to think about and kind of broaden the discussion a little bit. And the very first thing that Chat GPT came back with me, and this was a year, actually, it's probably about 2 years ago, and first thing that happened was it said, "I'm really sorry that you or someone is going through this." I'm like, okay, that was a milestone moment for me. I'm like, okay, now the computing resource here is now empathizing with me to kind of soften my reception to what it was about to tell me. And it was just interesting on that trust and authenticity side.
Yeah, I'll just jump in here. Also, like, it is incredibly important that consumers, companies wanting to use AI themselves or deploy AI themselves, that they have absolute trust in the tools that are out there. And that's something like Salesforce has tried to build in and has built in to all of our AI products. Like, it is possible to design a product, build a product that protects proprietary customer data, that doesn't allow the data to be trained on or to be used to train some of these like large LLMs. It's possible to build AI tools that have audit trails, source citations, create this like the data lineage, so that you can, just like you would with an employee, like you can go back and like check the work, see if it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. That in our products, that's in there by default. But there's also a role too for the businesses that are using this as well. It's as powerful as AI is, it's not a magic box that you can just put out there without any like thought, if you're a business owner, as to how it's going to be used. So there's a responsibility there. Think of all the other technologies that have come that have enhanced business. There's always a lot of excitement, and then there's the reality of like, how do we actually deploy this in a way that is additive to our business, that makes us better, that like retains the relationship we have with our customers or whoever we're servicing. And so like, it's essential. Like, trust has to be a part of AI.
Well, I love that perspective. I read something that, we're entering the consequences era of AI, where people are saying, hey, we didn't protect ourselves, we didn't build this correctly, and now we're dealing with the consequences associated with it. And Zach, I mean, as a local guy that's followed Salesforce for a long, long time, you guys have always built the premium product in the market that considers all of those things. And I think that's really valuable. I know a lot of people that work at your organization, and I think you guys are doing it right. And I think that's a big, huge differentiator in the future, right? Because anybody can spin up something quick and easy now, but might accidentally expose all sorts of problems they don't know about. And so I think that's really a valuable insight. Jen, I'm going to pivot to you for just a second. So As we think about maybe the next legislative session, or we think about some of these issues you outlined in your last segment here about the things we need to lean into, I have to imagine your role. One of the struggles is kind of finding that balance between overregulation and underregulation, right? Because we could do nothing and just let the federal government tell us what to do and be laissez-faire and go, or we could accidentally overdo it, right? My experience as an outsider, I'm not in the weeds like you guys are, but my experience as an outsider, and Zach alluded to this earlier with the privacy conversation, is that Indiana tends to be slower moving when it comes to this sort of regulation. We can tend to follow and not necessarily be on the tip of the spear leading. But how are you thinking about that? I mean, how is ITIA being driven, and how are we encouraging legislators to be thinking about this?
Couple things. First of all, we do have an AI working group within ITIA, which I believe you are all part of. And so we've put out policies, kind of guidelines from the AI working group, guiding principles, if you will, that we're sharing with legislators. And it's both for, I think, advice to businesses as well as to legislators about how to approach some of these things. But from a purely legislative standpoint, a couple of items to mention. Just one, Indiana did pass a law last year, so last year or the year before, that was targeting protecting people from deep fakes in political or election materials. So it was a pretty narrow focus. But if an entity or a campaign is using something that's AI generated and manipulating an image, a video, audio, etc., the state law now requires them to disclose that it has been AI modified or generated. So that was kind of a small step. I think generally speaking, our goal is to not stifle innovation, but rather focus more on narrowly tailored, risk-based policies that are around protecting, children, consumers, businesses, etc. You mentioned earlier that the legislature did pass the social media ban law this year, which is really only is focused on a handful of companies. And that's something that's being driven across the country. I think we all assume this is with the Supreme Court, goal to see what, where the court's going to stand on that versus, freedom of speech and privacy and parental protections. Those things are also part, by the way, of the White House guidance for AI policies. So a lot of these things, again, point back to if something were enacted on the federal level, I think it would make things a lot easier for folks at the state level in terms of figuring out how to advance on policies. But anyway, more to your question, again, I think we will see more on K through 12 and workforce training. I would expect that we'll see more things, whether it's grants or programs geared toward helping folks adopt, implement responsible AI use in schools and finding ways that we can help Hoosier businesses across the state. Maybe some of those small, medium-sized businesses that are less tech savvy, how we can help them be more exposed and implement use of AI in their companies to be more competitive. I think that's something that we would expect to see soon.
I think that's great. I had a chance to interview Dr. Jenner a couple episodes ago, and I was very encouraged. She's certainly leaning in a very big way and
She's
understands
awesome.
this stuff. I mean, this is not an easy topic. She was explaining to me, Jen, I know you know this, and I'm sure Zach and John probably do too, but our listeners, man, she manages a $26 billion budget and has literally every headache in Indiana on her desk. Like, that just feels like a challenging role. And I was very impressed by her approach and her attitude and how she's attacking some of this stuff. So very,
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah, we are on the what is it called, the workforce team or whatever it is for AI, the internal subcommittee group or whatever at ITIA. So just for the audience, The things that the group has been focused on are human centricity and dignity, operational accountability, right? So being able to trace and explain stuff, oversight and compliance, that sort of thing. And then also data and privacy, right? Because those are things that matter too. And so, yeah, it's been neat. It's been really neat to see the organization lean in and say, these are the things we care about. These are the things that as you're drafting policy or having these conversations, these are the things that we want to make sure that you're watching. And so, yeah, just to kind of reiterate what you were sharing there, like those are the pillars, so to speak, from the organization that help drive that.
Well, I think, Jayson, you talk about drafting policy. One of the things I think we can do, and maybe the most, one of the, I mean, it's a great service we could offer to our legislature is awareness of what's going on around us in the industry and with this technology in general, because you can't expect every one of our legislators to understand this stuff like those that are building it or using it do. And so, when you look at our legislature, you've got a geographically dispersed, very diverse industry and business experience. So you could have literally a funeral home director from one community, an accountant from another, and you name it, a furniture distributor in another. They all have different levels of understanding of the implications here. So one of the most important roles that I think organizations like us offer is education and awareness of what's going on around us and in the world of AI. So and all these other challenging topics, but AI especially right now.
For sure. I got maybe one or two more questions. And this one might be the grenade in the room, so to speak, because there's never a good way to talk about this, and I don't know how to answer.
I'm gonna mute and turn my camera off. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
But one of the things we talk about a lot is data centers, right? And data centers, I think everyone knows, are necessary in the path forward here, both from a national security perspective and from just the state of the world. I mean, this technology is moving so fast. I use Claude every day, and Claude's having outages every day because it can't keep up. And I think that this is starting to become like skating to where the puck is going. I interviewed a guy recently who is in the power side of the equation. And it takes 10 years to build stations, power stations, and all these sorts of things. I mean, it doesn't just happen overnight. The technology is moving faster than the infrastructure. And then I look at, small communities that are saying, we don't want that in our backyard, right? I don't want a solar farm. I don't want a nuclear reactor. I don't want a data center. Just playing this out. I'm not, and this is me talking from what I've seen in the past. You've got Meta and Google and Amazon and OpenAI and these groups that are trillion-dollar companies, right? Trying to build a $5 billion data center. And that $5 billion data center is being blocked by 2 or 3 city councilors that are maybe got 4,500 votes to get elected. Like, I mean, the dystopian future there, from my perspective, is very concerning. And so how does this state, I mean, are we going to see, I can appreciate the state of Indiana waiting for federal policy related issues, but are we going to see the state of Indiana start to issue some, kind of pro growth, pro data center, pro water, power, all the things that go into that? Or is it, I mean, how does this play out? And I mean, you don't have to, this doesn't have to be official response from ITIA. Maybe it can just be a conversation, because I don't know, Jen, if you even have answers to this question, but I can tell you these are the questions I get from listeners.
There are a lot of layers there. One, Indiana has been pretty strongly advocating for data centers throughout the state. A few years ago, they passed a law that would exempt data centers from essentially provide tax incentives for data centers. And that was kind of the first big welcome mat to bring your data centers here. And it worked. And we have lots of interest from lots of companies who want to put data centers here. Now, as you mentioned, obviously, there's been growing opposition at the grassroots level. And I think part of that, again, is centered around quite a bit of, I don't know, fear, lack of awareness, I guess I would say, in terms of what it actually means. Because we've been, happily welcoming storage facilities, manufacturing facilities, large, distribution facilities in lots of places across the state that have some similar footprints in terms of, size and things to that.
But much smaller economic impacts.
Yes,
For
correct.
sure.
And so I think what we're seeing both from the governor and legislative leaders is an increased focus that we want to create the right playing field for data centers to be built here, but also recognizing that we can't afford to have the cost be put on the back of residential ratepayers. That's something that nearly everyone agrees with. There's plenty of debate about whether or not it is. But when you have, large corporations that have the ability to make the investments, there's a real opportunity. I mean, Indiana also needs major investment in our utility infrastructure. It's a constant, I mean, just like roads, it's a constant things that you need to keep investing in. And we have this opportunity to use the interest from data center developers to help fund some of the cost of that utility infrastructure. So I think if you can find the right balance that protects residential ratepayers, then ideally you will see more acceptance. Part of it is, I think, some misinformation with regard to water use and other things. And certainly there are lots of different types of developments, but what we've seen recently are some, it's like a closed loop system, right? Where they're recycling water. The water use is much less than what had been projected or predicted long before. It all depends on how it's done. I think there's a way for them to be built out in Indiana that can both protect ratepayers on utility costs and also be mindful of water usage. And then, you can set different parameters as far as setbacks and noise and things like that, to protect communities. So I think we really need to get it right. Folks are focused on that. They also, in this past session, did pass language requiring essentially a study to be done on data centers that the Indiana Finance Authority is charged with doing and providing information to the Economic Development Corporation as to the kind of challenges and opportunities. So lots and lots of discussion. I think it's going to continue to grow, but for sure, I would say overall, Indiana has a welcome mat out, and I think that's the right approach as long as we have all these guardrails that are protecting ratepayers and protecting communities where they might be placed.
That's really encouraging to hear. It's like everything else in this whole conversation. It's nuanced. There's no right or wrong. We don't just want you to come in and kind of mess up all of our land and just to build a thing, right? But also I like to hear that we're open for business because this is going to happen somewhere, right? And if it can generate economic impact and help us improve infrastructure, and I mean, some of the studies I've seen, they bring a $5 billion data center to town. That adds millions of dollars to local school systems. Like that's a real thing. And so I'm just super fascinated by this conversation. I think it's one that doesn't have a perfect, just like click a button answer, but I'm encouraged, Jen, to hear that they're talking about it and people are studying it and they're working hard to try to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, to your
Yeah,
point,
and
Jayson. Go ahead, Jen. Go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say one other thing, which I should have touched on, you did, Jayson, is the investment in local communities. So we are seeing these companies come in and offer significant investments to local communities and schools, to be good community partners, obviously providing some incentive to be there. And part of the legislation that was passed this year does require them to pay a certain amount that would to local communities of the utility taxes that essentially they're offset from the tax credits that were passed, or not tax credits, but the exemption that was passed a few years ago. So there's a real opportunity for communities if they're willing to seize it. And as you said, the one of the challenges is if you get 25 angry folks in a room at a council meeting, sometimes that can be pretty overwhelming for the counselors who maybe aren't used to having more than one or two people show up to speak about something. So it gets pretty noisy. And then just lastly, sometimes there's some irony in how opposition groups are mobilizing, certainly using AI and leveraging the systems that we have to have. I mean, at the end of the day, data centers are vital digital infrastructure that we need to be a strong and competitive economy. So I just think we have to do it the right way, and that's what I think folks are trying to do from the state level.
I'm going to speak to that briefly because I guess I'm probably allowed to say this. You guys probably couldn't, but I was doing a research project, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago, about a Facebook group in particular that was an anti something Facebook group, right, in one of these small towns. And to your point, 25 people show up to a city council meeting and it feels like the whole world's against you, right? And so I looked at this Facebook group. It had, man, 1,200 people in this Facebook group. And like, I don't know, 6,000 people vote in the community. So it felt like 20% of the entire voting block was in this group anti this thing. And I did what I do and I unpacked the whole thing and found out that half of those were bots. They weren't even real human beings. And most of the rest of them weren't even from that area. They joined these national groups and they put a post up and then they all flood, they swarm basically to all these negative groups all across the country just to build up their numbers. And so there's people from Virginia and California and Texas that don't even live in this community, but they're inflating those numbers and making the local elected officials feel scared, right? Man, I don't want to piss off 20% of my voting block. That's wild. But that's not your voting block. So that's a real thing, very real thing. All right, last question for you guys. I asked this question to everyone. So feel free to go as deep as you want to on it. But when we're talking about AI, we talk about a lot of the cool things, a lot of the neat stuff that's happening. But part of this whole podcast is designed around the authentic, the human, the hard part of the conversation. This isn't easy. And so as you think about what you have witnessed personally on AI over the last couple of years since it's really started to take hold, is there anything in particular that keeps you up at night? Is there anything about it that's like, man, I'm worried for that? And maybe you don't even have an answer to it. It's just something that's on your radar. It's just something you're paying attention to. And I'll give you mine just so you have some context here. So I look at I call it the haves and the have-nots. And this isn't just like socioeconomic. This is like opportunity. If you're using AI early and you're good at it and you know what you're doing, like John said with his developers earlier, you can be 5 times more efficient than someone else. And we don't know where the job force is going and the markets are going and all that. But man, if I'm good at it and you're not, it's an unfair advantage. And so when I was talking to Dr. Jenner about this, I said, are you seeing that in the school systems where some school systems are really adopting and leaning in and other ones are ignoring it? And she said, yes. And it has almost nothing to do with the socioeconomic side of it. It's just the administration, right? The administrators that get it and want to lean in are giving opportunities to their kids, and the ones that don't aren't. She said, we have some very affluent communities that are just like ostriching this whole thing and don't want to deal with it. And I find that to be super fascinating. So to me, that's one where it just feels like we're creating through this tech an opportunity, a bigger chasm, I think, between where people are going to be 20 or 30 years from now. So any thoughts from each of you on what it is that maybe keeps you up at night when it comes to AI stuff?
I mean, I'll dovetail into your comments there, Jason. I wouldn't say that I wake up thinking about it, but newly, probably in this year, maybe the last year or so, I've been reading more about the way the use of AI modifies our brains and our thinking and our ability to do the tasks before AI. And I think while on one hand, we are creating this chasm between those that use it and those that don't, right? Haves and have-nots, or more productive and less productive. But at the same time, we're building a generation of people that are going to lose that ability to really write a creative letter or to sit down and give an original thought that's more than just a prompt to AI. I mean, that's a very, very real implication of everything that we're talking about here. So I don't know how you balance that, but that is one thing that kind of concerns me, that someone that's overly reliant on the use of AI will ultimately lose the abilities to do the things that you're asking AI to do that you would have had to have done before this was ever on the scene.
Let me give you a real world example to that, John. How many 10-digit phone numbers do each of you know today? Like where you type in the full phone number when you call someone. I don't know my mom's phone number. I'm not kidding.
Very
I just
few.
hit Karen and it calls her, right? I can get few of the digits right, but not all of them.
Yeah.
It's wild. Zach or
Absolutely.
Jen, you guys have any other thoughts on that?
I mean, my concerns are similar. I think that, and there, we've touched on a lot of this already. We really need AI literacy and workforce development so that we can continue to have, like, we can continue to be humans, like authentic, like real humans that are using AI as a tool, but not task offloading or mental offloading. Lots of things that used to just be done by human beings. It was maybe 3 years ago. I was riding when I lived in Seattle. I was riding a bus to the office, and it was like my bus route like goes through areas with like lots of kids, and some high schoolers got on the bus, and they were having a conversation, the two of them as kids, as students, about like how to properly translate a Chinese character. And they were having that conversation with OpenAI or ChatGPT or whatever they were using, like as a mediator for that. And in my mind, like that's the best way to use a tool like a public facing LLM. And like I want people to use it that way. It's not something to be afraid of, but it also requires like that we've said this before, like we have to take it seriously. Like people have to be like literate into like what AI can and cannot do. Like where do we just as people like put the boundaries beyond of which like we're not going to go, so we can retain that authenticity. So it doesn't feel like we're quite there for having that conversation as a society yet, but there's momentum toward it.
Jen, any final thoughts?
I think I agree with John. I do worry about what happens to the kind of our ability to be creative and reward people for creativity, because I can make songs and poems and things on ChatGPT now that I certainly couldn't have made before. And I worry about people being left behind, whether that's kids or businesses. And then as we've seen some of these kind of tragic stories of people who are isolated and lacking like real relationships and getting into pretty dark spaces. So, there's all kinds of things I think that we have to consider, and just hope that as we thoughtful people put companies and products and policies together, that we somehow are trying to do the best for everyone.
Yeah, totally agree. You guys summed it up quite nicely. Well, thank you all for your time today. Really fun to talk to you guys. I'll see you at the next meeting, and then I'm going to do a nice little call out for y'all here afterwards, because this organization has been probably the most impactful that I've been a part of in terms of leaning in and making a difference here in the state. And so, Jen, very grateful for your leadership on this stuff. John and Zach have both been vocal leaders in the space also, but you have lots of folks around you that are really cool and that are really helping make this happen. And these are hard conversations that are bigger than one legislative session. And so there needs to be that longitudinal kind of direction and that constant gentle pressure on the legislator to help make sure that these things are heard and accounted for. And so sincere thank you to all you guys today. Thanks for taking time with us. And I appreciate you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thanks, everyone. See you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks again to John, Jen, and Zach for coming on today's show. These are people that are choosing to spend their time making the local community, the world around them, a better place. And I think it's really awesome. And so one thing I do want to do here as a final call out is, if you're in the tech space, if you're interested in this conversation, if you want to have a voice at the table with the Indiana legislator, with the governor, with folks that are driving policy, I think that you should go to indianatechnology.org and join ITIA. This is the Indiana Technology and Innovation Association. As you've heard, it's a statewide association driving tech companies and their partners. Go there, sign up, join, come to some of these meetings, be a part of this conversation. Jen and her team, Joel, big, huge thanks to Joel, who is, I don't know his job title, but operations manager, chief of staff, assistant to the regional manager. I don't know, you can ask Joel, but he is very good. He is constantly keeping us updated on what's going on. He's polling the group, asking questions. He's setting up meetings, driving agendas, and helping on the policy side. And so thanks to Joel, thanks to Jen. And please go join ITIA. Next week, folks, I am sitting down with a friend of mine, Adam Brown. Adam Brown is the founder and CEO of a company called S-Gridworks. Adam is a power guy. So he has spent his career in the power industry, and he's an interesting cat. You're going to love Adam. He is just all energy all the time. But when AI came along, it really changed his worldview on what he was capable of doing. And so Adam and I sit down, we talk about the power grid, we talk about the strains that AI is going to put on the power grid, how communities are thinking about this stuff, how big power companies are thinking about this stuff, but also how you build with it. So he has a handful of practical, like, this is what I did. So Adam and I are constantly trading. Hey, dude, did you see this new feature that rolled out, or have you tried downloading this LLM or doing this sort of thing? And so Adam's just a really smart guy. And so check in next week. Come listen to the Authentic and Agentic podcast. Again, huge thanks to the ITIA folks, to TechPoint. Mira Awards coming up soon. You'll hear more about that, and we'll be a part of that conversation. And thanks again to Indiana Wesleyan. We'll see you guys next week.